All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. If you don't know, we have the lovely
Mhm.
Nicki Preto here, the author of my beloved Crown of Feathers and
Yep.
also Bonesmith. So
Coffee here
I'm so
too.
excited to talk tonight. If you are new to my channel, welcome. And if you are not new to my channel, you will know that I talk about Crown of Feathers pretty consistently. And pretty much every book recommendation, I somehow weasel it in because it is like my favorite book of all time. So
Oh.
I'm very excited to chat tonight and just get to know you more, have people chat with us, and yeah, I'm excited. So, anything you want to say about yourself?
Not really, but I was gonna say that Megan was a part of my street team, so she's contractually obligated to constantly talk about Crown of Feathers. She has no choice in the matter, so she is forced. But no, I mean, as you mentioned, I have the Crown of Feathers trilogy out. So that's 3 books in that series, and Bonesmith is the first in my next series. It's going to be a duology, so 2 books. I'm Canadian, which people may not know. You'll probably be able to tell once I start saying about, because apparently I say about funny. I don't hear it, but that's what I've been told. Yeah, don't really, I'm bad at the bio stuff. Google me.
Oh god, I say bag funny. I go bag,
Bag.
bag.
There's so many little twinges in like dialect and pronunciation. There's a lot of people in the US like Minnesota, people from Minnesota sound Canadian. They sound like people from like Eastern Canada. Like there's some weird like carryover in the accents and stuff. So yeah.
Interesting.
I'm from close to Toronto. That's pretty mild, I think, in terms
Mhm.
of accent, but
I apparently have like the like quintessential American accent. Like
Mhm.
Ohio is like the least accentless
Right.
accent. So that's what people study when they're trying to learn an American accent or like
Oh,
no accent. I learned that in when I was studying theater. So I thought that was interesting.
oh, that is
Um,
cool. You study theater. How fun.
mhm. But yeah, let's get into the questions. We got a ton from the Instagram stories. So we'll just
So
start with some like general things.
cool.
People would like to know, do you have a writing routine and what is it like?
Oh, it depends if I'm being good or bad. I am in a really bad writing routine lately. Oh, where to begin? I mean, let's go with the perfect day and then we can talk about what I actually do most of the time. So for me, like I've definitely learned, and the only way to learn, I think, is trial and error if you're a writer. Like, and it's important, I think, early on to pay attention. Like, I remember starting to track your word count. How many words can you do in an hour, and which times of the day are the best for you, and like all sorts of. So over years and time, you kind of figure it out. For me, first thing in the morning is like peak writing time. I think my brain is clearer. I think weirdly being tired makes you a little more like it's almost like a dream-like state or something. Like you're less connected with the living world. And I think also if it's dark, there's the impression that the rest of the world is asleep. And for some reason that's like liberating, I think, as a creative person. Like it makes you once like 9 a.m. hits and I start getting emails in my inbox and stuff, like there's like distractions for the world, people wake up, like there's noises in like the house and wherever, like there's something so peaceful and magical about the early morning. So, I mean, not crazy early, like 7 a.m. If I get up and I'm at the computer at 7 a.m., I'm like really pleased with myself. Lately it's been like 10:30 a.m. So, but yeah, I write early if I can. And I usually do like 15-minute sprints, which is quite short, like 15-minute timer, but my attention span these days, it's kind of what I'm best at. If I try and do 30 minutes, my attention starts to wane. So I try and like really do 15-minute bursts. And again, when I started tracking that, I remember when I first did Crown of Feathers, like, my first real deadlines and all that. I used to work for like 16 hours a day. Like I was at the computer all day. And what I started doing finally was tracking when I was actually working versus when I was like doom scrolling or like checking my emails. And it was like really shocking in a bad way how little I was actually writing, but I was at the computer the whole time, but like, going on Instagram and like being stupid. So like I would be at the computer for like 16 hours and I'd be lucky if I got like 6 hours of work in. And that's like really shocking. Like I just couldn't believe that. So, long story short, like I try to monitor my time better now. And that's like doing the little sprints really helps. So if I have like a great day, I'll sit at my computer from like 7 till, let's say, around like noonish lunch, but I usually take a break in there. And then I'll come back for another couple hours in the afternoon, and then I'm hopefully done around dinner time. And like that's it. When I'm on deadline, like which I am now, I tend to work again sometimes in the evening. And yeah, I usually only get, like, if I'm not on a deadline and I'm working kind of normal person, I only write for like maybe 2 or 3 hours a day. But it takes me like 6 hours at the computer to get that done. Like even when I'm really being disciplined, I'm lucky if I produce for like half of the time I'm there, which is, but it's important to know these things about yourself. I've figured that part out. So early morning writing works for me, tracking in the 15 minutes. But like I said, I've been kind of, when I'm tired, when I'm lazy, when I'm like, right now I'm doing like back-to-back deadlines. So I just have the willpower. So I find I'm like sleeping in late, and that what that leads to is working late. Like I think I worked till like 10 o'clock last night. I'm like, that's stupid. But I slept in and I didn't get started till later. So it probably doesn't amount to that much more work. But if I'm disciplined, I get it done early and I can like go out with my friends or like do normal human things. But when I don't, I'm just like at the computer all day, all night, like, oh God. So, I don't have one of those super beautiful aesthetic work schedules either, by the way. I don't like go outside and take in the sunrise or do any of that. In my pajamas.
Your morning journaling, go do
yoga. None of that. I get up, I make a coffee or tea, I sit in front of the computer and I make myself work. Like it's not as pretty. It's not like the fantasy version that you might be imagining.
I've seen you do like writing retreats before. What are those like?
Oh, those are magic. They really are. If you're someone who likes to write, it's so worth doing if you can. I just got together, like, I know there's some you can like pay for and like they're run officially by, I don't know, companies or authors or I don't know. For me, it's just like, close friends who like to write. We rent a little cabin in the woods. You just kind of hide away from the rest of the world for a few days. And it's just so magical. I can't recommend it enough. It's just something about being around other people working, like you're all writing together, like that energy really feeds you. I know some people like really thrive on it. For me, I really enjoy it, but like those are the people who go to coffee shops and stuff. Like I think they really like to be around. I usually write home, but something about that's so magical. Just like I said, you kind of vacate your own life because there's always stresses and worries, like dishes to do and things to worry about. But when you're at this like little cottage space, like there's nothing there but you, your laptop, like it's really, love it.
I feel like even being in like that cottage space, especially for like fantasy authors.
Totally.
I can definitely see how that kind of environment you would thrive in.
I wrote the first words for Bonesmith at a cottage I go to like every year, at least once a year. And it's like, we go in the winter, snowy, like isolated, and there's a fireplace, like total vibes. But I do think like I've even done like hotel room writing retreats, like sometimes just getting out of your own life is really helpful.
Yeah, getting out of routine.
Exactly. It just kind of shakes you up. And if you can go somewhere and just focus without, like I said, other people coming and going, or, like just there's something really powerful in that. If you can afford to do it, if you can find a way to do it, it's so fun. Like I said, even if you go alone.
Bree says the writing retreat sounds so wonderful.
They really are. They really, really are. They're so fun. They're definitely highly recommend if you can pull it off. Definitely.
Did you ever do like NaNoWriMo or any of that stuff when you were younger?
I did NaNoWriMo maybe one time. Not that long ago. What book did I work on? It was never really a big, I don't need external pressure or external deadline. I don't need any of that. Like I'm very self-motivated, like painfully so. So I don't need that stuff. I did it once. I'm like, oh, cool. But it didn't really do much for me. So, I mean, it sounds like it's fun for some people. Again, like the community part is huge for people. And I totally get that. And some people need external deadlines. I know lots of people like that. It's just something you got to figure out about yourself. For me, I don't need that. So it doesn't really serve me, I guess, in any special way. But it seems like a cool way, especially to meet other writers. Like I know I was very lucky early on. I joined like a writing group in Toronto and I met some, like friends I have to this day that was like really powerful to meet other writers and published writers and stuff. Like, so I can see why if you don't have that, things like NaNoWriMo are like a great opportunity to meet other writers. And like that alone could be totally worth it. I've just been lucky that I didn't need that necessarily from it. So it just didn't really do much for me. But like, I know some people are like religious about it. Like, and they do like Camp NaNoWriMo and they do stuff.
We had that in school. Like they would have like NaNoWriMo like writing groups and clubs at school, and people would go crazy. Like the English professors would let them work on NaNoWriMo during English. Like it was
wow.
intense.
That's pretty cool. I mean, whatever it takes, right? Like I know writers, again, like once you're published, like they need the deadlines. Like they need that deadline from their editor or from their agent, or they'll just kind of like, you know, screw around for months. Like some people really need that framework, and that's totally legitimate. Like figure out what you need, and that's a great opportunity for someone who needs that like push.
Oh yeah.
But I'm psychotic enough on my own that I don't.
Psychotic.
I just push to absurd, you know, goals and deadlines and stuff. So yeah.
Do you tend to like plan ahead, or do you just kind of write what comes to you? I think there's like terms like plotter, pantser. Is that what the terminology is?
Yes, plotter or a pantser, like fly by the seat of your pants. Yeah. I'm a major plotter. I tried to pants a book once and I stalled, and I'm like, this is horrible. Why would anyone do this to themselves? It just, I don't know what it is. Like, I enjoy the outlining and plotting process like a ton. Like I really, for me, that's like the best part almost, because it's kind of like, I remember, I don't know if anyone here watched like the Lord of the Rings extended edition bonus material crap. Like that stuff came out probably before half of you were freaking born. But anyway, they talk about storyboarding for movies. And I remember Peter Jackson saying, you know, for the price of some paper and some pencils, I've had a pass at doing the movie. And that's very much what I think outlining is. Like you get it, you're sort of writing the book before writing the book. So you're more, for me, I get to be more experimental and more like, what if I did this? What if I did that? But if I did that while writing hundreds of thousands of words, like it would be way more stressful and bog me down way more. So for me, it's like I get to have fun and like figure out where can I take the story, and I come up with scenes, and it's very exciting for me. But it allows me to do it ahead of time, to notice the holes, to notice the problems, and to kind of get a grasp at what I'm doing before I dedicate, you know, months of time to it.
Yeah.
It could have a huge plot hole or something that you're really stuck on, and like getting stuck mid-draft is really hard. Like, I mean, it always happens. Like, I think I've never perfectly plotted anything. Like you always have to kind of pull back, rethink, and like there's always a certain amount of like pantsing that happens. But getting completely stuck in a book, if you have no idea where you're going, like for me, it just completely messes me up. So like I said, I tried it once, but I'm definitely a plotter outliner type. I feel like it's a spectrum. Like I'm not like,
yeah.
Like I'm not like there's people, like I'm not married to my outlines. They change all the time, but you know, like I'm like, you know, a little bit pantser, mostly plotter, but I'm sure some people are much more rigid, but most people I talk about, even the ones who outline, it always changes in the writing. It's more, I think for me, like I'm an anxious person, and I think maybe just alleviates my anxiety to know that no, you know this works. Like you've thought about this, right? Like because you lose, I think sometimes you lose confidence or you lose like faith maybe during the process, and you're like, no, you already went, you know this works, you know it makes sense. Like keep going, right? Like, and you get to look forward to your ending, or you get to look forward to the scenes you're excited to write, and it kind of gives me like forward momentum, I think.
Yeah. And you said it's like a spectrum, so like I was going to say, have you ever been surprised by how a story like unfolded?
Yes, I think I get surprised every book. I get surprised by things I thought made sense and they don't, or you know, like things that suddenly, no matter how much planning or plotting you do, like you can't know. At least I can't. Like I always hit a wall eventually where I have to just start writing it now. Like eventually you have to just get in there, because you can't fully know your character till they start speaking and they start doing things, and like, and through that process, sometimes something that you planned ahead of time, you'll go, this doesn't make so much sense anymore. They're not as like, well, they're not as reckless as I thought they would be, although Ren clearly is. But you know, like you kind of come up with something like Ren. I think I actually struggled with her at the start. I was making her a bit more timid anyway, and like I think sometimes like your preconceived notions, and then we actually get into writing, things shift a little, and then you'll eventually get to a point where you're like, this doesn't make sense for them. So you have to kind of step back and reconfigure. So it happens to me all the time. I wish I could think of like a really good example. But even just like some of my fan favorite characters, for example, Sparrow from the Crown of Feathers series, who I adore. Like she just popped out of nowhere. I didn't plan her. I just like had a scene. I'm like, the scene's boring. It needs like something. And then she just like
appeared.
strolled on the page and she's like formed and she's just funny and weird. And I'm like, I don't know where this came from, you know, like, so that kind of stuff always happens. And, you know, it's weird when that's like people's favorite stuff, or like scenes that you didn't plan, but you just kind of find yourself writing and then they're amazing. And you're like, where did this come from? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's always like, that's the magic of it, I think, right? No matter how much you plan, no matter how much you think you know, no matter, like, there's always weird surprises and things. And sometimes they're great, sometimes they're like the worst, but it's all part of the process.
Bubble Twist says Sparrow is one of my favorites. Yes.
Everybody loves Sparrow. I mean, I get a lot of messages for Sparrow.
Mm-hmm.
Truly.
I feel like Sparrow gives Toph vibes almost. And totally. Toph is such a fan favorite.
Yeah.
So I can see like why Sparrow is a fan favorite for sure.
I mean,
obviously, Val is for Callum. Callum, if you don't know, is also on the street team alongside Bree and Alex and I. And Val's biggest fan from Crown of Feathers.
Truly. Oh my God, so funny. I mean, what's cool nowadays, like I talk to readers all the time. Like I wouldn't be like, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's Sparrow point of view chapters in the third book because of how much people love Sparrow. Like I don't know if I would have done that otherwise, but just people were you know, I love her too. And it just kind of, you know, so it's just funny.
And those were some of the best chapters.
I mean, I adore her. And I was scared to write her. You know, she's blind. So I was like, oh, am I going to do this justice and everything? And also because she was so, you know, adored. I'm like, oh, like, you know, but she was so, I knew who she was by then. So it wasn't so scary. But yeah, like weirdly interactions can long live. Nice job, Brianna. He'll be happy to know you repped for him. Yeah, I mean, and Val is very polarizing. A lot of people really dislike her. But she makes you feel something, that's for sure. So I guess I did my job there.
What is it they say? Like, art is supposed to make you think, or art is supposed to make you feel something. So, you know, you did your job.
And generally, indifference is, I think indifference is the worst reaction you could get, right? Like, I'd rather you hated her or loved her than, like, don't really care. Like, so. Yeah. A reaction of any sort is cool with me. Absolutely. I mean, I love them. I love Val too. Like, you know, I'm here for that for sure.
Of course.
Yeah, I summoned him. Yep.
Hi, Callum. Welcome to the chat. All right. So speaking about like writing and everything, did you take any like bits of experience or knowledge from when you were writing Bonesmith or writing Crown of Feathers into Bonesmith? Like, how has your writing process stayed the same or changed or evolved between the two series?
I think I was like in PTSD after Crown of Feathers when I started, not to be like overly dramatic, but I think 100% what you write before informs what you write next. And like, I remember when I sat down, like when I realized that Bonesmith was going to be the next idea, I was like, it will not be multiple point of view, and it will not be long. And I mean, it's not as long as Crown of Feathers in my defense, but it's still long and it has multiple freaking point of views. So I failed in my, you know, efforts to not like drown. Like Crown of Feathers was a really hard series to write. I was a debut author. I didn't know what I was getting into, and I made the book so long, like the first book so long and so complicated and like all these point of views. And I was like, oh my God, what have I done? So as much as I adore I love reading books like that, I loved writing it, but it was very hard in, you know, traditional publishing. They kind of want a book a year from you, and that's a lot. It was a huge undertaking. It was very hard on me. So I was like, I can't go through that again. But then, you know, over time and once you get into the book, I had to do what served the story. And I had this inkling. I'm like, kind of think I need some chapters from like Leo and Julian. I'm like, like I really didn't want to. I resisted it. My editor asked me like several times and I was like, no, I'm not doing it. But I did, like, I'm like, it helps the story. I think it did. A lot of people love them. Like a lot of people have said they really liked though. I did way less chapters. Like Crown of Feathers was like alternating, like each chapter was a different character. Like this one was, you know, just I think maybe 4 or 5 chapters.
Yeah, I think we had like 2 of Leo and 2
and like 2 like much less of an undertaking. So I didn't fully backslide. But then again, I'm writing the sequel now, and like, there's more point of views. Like it's what happens because it widens your story lens, which is great, but also hard. So I mean, that like those were the things I tried to like take with me, but those were, like I said, like PTSD style. Like I was just trying to save myself from myself.
Yeah.
I did learn things, I'm sure. You understand your process, I think, a little better. I've tried to be much chiller about deadlines. Like deadlines used to really like make me sick, kind of like, and I would work myself to the bone, like I mentioned, like 16-hour days.
To the Bonesmith.
For Bonesmith. There's a lot of like bone puns that come up in my life now all of a sudden, and like corpse, like, I don't know. When I sent the draft of the sequel to my editor, like I was like, I can't believe I missed the opportunity to call it a skeletal draft, because it was very, very like slim and short, and like I don't know, puns back and forth to each other. But anyway, I think I've learned a bit more about my process and being a little bit more aware of deadlines and trying not to burn myself out so much. But each book is its own unique challenge. Each book has new problems to solve. I hate magic systems, but I keep writing them, and they're so hard.
They're so good though.
Like I love them, but I think I like get a little like cuckoo about them, and I get like really into these like crazy complex details, and like I think And
the world building is my favorite though, because I feel like you think of like every single detail, and I have a question and I can answer it myself with the work of the book. Like I love it. Like I love world building, and it's just,
I love it too, clearly, and I again don't know how to rein myself in on that. Although it's so funny too. I thought in my mind Bonesmith is like light world building, because I'm thinking of Crown of Feathers, but I get lots of people saying there's so much world building in this. I'm like, is there? Like I thought I'd really scaled myself back, but I guess we are who we are.
I think it does have less than Crown of Feathers, but there is still like so much. But I could honestly like read history books from these worlds.
Right? Like that's how I am as a reader. I'm like, I love this stuff. Like I remember, like I always talk about Game of Thrones was like really inspiring to me, and I love the books. And people would complain about like paragraphs of description of like food and stuff. I'm like, I am here for this. Like I love all that crap. Like you cannot bore me with any of that. So it's hard for me, I think, as a writer trying to find the balance, because everyone's different. Especially I think for YA, there's like a lower tolerance for the kind of world building that adult epic fantasy has. You can literally like go to town and do whatever you want. YA people are very like, again, like I get a lot of the negative things said about my books talk about info dumping at the start. And I tried to do better with Bonesmith, but I still see that criticism. And I think but some people love it. So, it's like finding that balance where you want the story to push forward, but if you have made a complex world, like there's certain things people need to understand, or they're going to proceed in confusion, and like, I don't know. So it's a hard balance. That's what I love as a reader. I enjoy doing it, but God, there's so much that never even makes it in the books. Like the backstory I did for Bonesmith is crazy. And like the world, like I have like 1,000 years of history that is nowhere near. It's probably not going to, it's not going anywhere really in these books, but I do it for my own sake, I guess. Right. And then hopefully it comes through in some way in the story, but.
It looks like most of the people viewing also really enjoy world building.
My kind of people.
One of my favorite parts of Crown of Feathers is the world building. You do such a good job.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, like I said, I just love it. So I guess that's what comes through. Weirdly, I get asked about did I do it? Was it Canadian? Anyway, I get asked.
I'm curious.
I get asked a lot, and Brianna's Canadian, so she can hang with me if I have the accent. I get asked a lot about how to world build, but it's one of those things I don't really know how to explain very well, because I think I'm just excited and I just kind of do it because I enjoy it. I'm like, I don't really approach it in an intellectual, obviously it's intellectual, but I'm not like, time to world build. I'm more like, oh, let's talk about this because it's cool. Like I sort of approach it in a weird, like a sort of like as a fangirl, I guess. So it's hard to talk about. I'm like, I don't really know how I do it. I just spend way too many hours writing up documents no one will ever see.
No, at the end of the day, you have to do what you love, and
absolutely, there are way easier jobs to get paid not that much money doing. So if I'm going to do this one, I'm going to have a good time.
Speaking of the like authors and books that inspire you, you spoke to Game of Thrones. Is there any others?
In general, or we talking like Bonesmith specific?
Let's do general first, and then what inspired Bonesmith.
Okay, general. I mean, I did mention I feel like I get so much inspiration from Game of Thrones / Song of Ice and Fire, because it is such a massive, sprawling world. There's so many different stories there. Like, Bonesmith was inspired by kind of like Jon Snow with the Wall, but there's like a million. I feel like Crown of Feathers definitely had some like Daenerys and like Targaryen stuff. There's so many different corners of that world. So I just really love that kind of storytelling. It's just been one of my favorites in a really long time. And I mean, if I'm gonna look at what I've written and stuff too, like Tamara Pierce was a huge inspiration for me, writing Crown of Feathers. She's like one of the first ever to write epic fantasy for young adults featuring girls. I mean, just in general for young adults, because young adult wasn't always really a category, right? It was like middle grade kids books, and then it was like adult. So she was like a real trailblazer in that way. And I remember picking up her books and just being like, whoa, like my mind was blown, because everything else I picked up was like adult fantasy and was mostly, like I enjoyed some of it, but it was mostly about and for boys, it seemed. I think that's changed a lot. This is years ago. This was a while ago, but she was like, and just like she always had a lot of animal magic stuff happening, like her type of fantasy. There was lots of like good people in her world. I feel like she just had this knack. I don't know. So I loved her too. Who else? I mean, it's hard now. I think it's weird once you're published, you start to look at reading differently, and you start to like, you're aware that you're like looking for things that like maybe relate to your next. Like I feel like everything I read is like relating to my current project, my next project, or like, so it's sort of changed, I think, my experience of reading. But I do think like I picked up Gideon the Ninth after I started working on Bonesmith, because I was like, when I saw that book everywhere, I'm like, oh, this is going to be like something I need to address, and maybe I can use it as a comp title. But I hadn't read it before I came up with all this, so I can't really call it like inspiration, but it's a great like comparative title. Actually, one book series that really inspired me, and now I'm going to forget what it's called, Lockwood and Co. There's a Netflix show of it. I think, I don't know if it's considered middle grade or like, it's like,
I'm gonna look it up.
I think it's like younger end, young adult, maybe. I don't really know. It's what's the author's name?
Young adult supernatural thriller series by Jonathan Stroud.
Jonathan Stroud. So he had another really popular series way back, but I can't remember what it's called. I think it was like, I can't remember. Lots of people, it was very popular. Anyway, this one's about like ghost hunting people kind of in the modern era. But his like that really just inspired me for like how you would attack, like how they have like tools and instruments, and just how they would approach like fighting undead. So that was actually like, I didn't really think about it. Like I read it, months before, but it definitely like informed some of my ideas for how to, like I said, how to approach like fighting them. Of course, mine's like epic fantasy, and his, like I said, was like kind of modern day. But yeah, I mean, I guess those are some books. I'm really bad at remembering books I've read.
No, but it sounds.
Yeah. I mean, those are ones, again, there's like lots of, I mean, there's like my own favorites too that just inspire me as like a person. Like, I really loved Robin Lefebvre's series Grave Mercy, which I guess is like, they're like handmaidens to death. So I suppose you could think of that as maybe being something. It's, if you've not read them, they're phenomenal. They're like historical fantasy, and they're just a really good job of like incredible world building. And they're basically like nuns, and the god they serve is death. So they're assassins, but it's a beautiful, beautiful trilogy. And she actually picked it up again recently and added 2 more, which I haven't read yet, but I adored the original trilogy. So that's like awesome. That, like these things like sit in your brain for years, right? And then they come out in like surprising ways, but that's another great one. But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
What is your favorite quote you've written?
Oh God, who knows?
Put you on the spot.
Oh, favorite quote I've written.
Or one that stands out to you from the top of your head.
Yeah, like when I think about like Crown of Feathers had a lot of great epigraphs. So at the start of the chapter, right, the little lines. Yes. I mean, honestly, I think my favorite off the top of my head would be I had a sister once, because it really, I feel like it really speaks to what the whole series is about, and like, for the character who speaks it and everything, like I feel like, and I repeated it, and it just had a lot, like it doesn't sound like much, but when you've read the story, like I remember writing that out. Yeah, like, and there's a few from her, like from those that I'm sure I could think of, but like had a sister once just really felt like foreboding, and like, I don't know, something about that really, I feel like when I wrote that, it really like
Solidified.
resonated. Yeah, like when I'm trying to think of when I wrote that, at what stage in the process. But I felt like I had something, when I wrote that, I was like, yeah, like this is, that's another thing. Sorry, we're talking about things I learned, but like Crown of Feathers was so hard because of the length and the multiple point of view, but also the epigraphs and also all the interstitial extra content. Like, what was I thinking? Just remembering how stressful it was. Like, it was so fun to work on that stuff for the first book, but on the second and third, it was like extremely stressful because I just kept running out of time and they required like, they're almost like poems or something, the epigraphs, because they're very fragmented and they have to stand alone, but they also have to tell a larger story. And I remember being like, why did I do this?
So which of the 3 books was the like most difficult to bring to life, I guess?
The third one, for sure. I'm sure there's a variety of reasons for that. Probably, the end of the series, I'm sure, is always extremely hard. To be fair, the sequel was really hard. Like, Heart of Flames is really hard too, but I think I was like, I don't think I was aware of how hard it was until I was done. I was like, how did I survive that? Like, I think I was totally like deer in the headlights for that whole book because I rewrote like half of that book. Like, I thought it went well. I drafted it. Like, I thought I was doing okay. I was like, no sophomore slump for me. And then I went through a round of edits with my editor and still I'm like, I don't know. And then second round of edits, I was like, oh, I have to rewrite half of this.
Yeah.
Can I get some extra time on my deadline? So anyway, that one was hard too, but I think I was too like, whatever. I just dove right in, didn't really think about it, but I knew there was so much to wrap up in the third one. And there's like a really long battle scene. I mean, it takes, again, people call that book slow and it just makes me laugh. Sometimes like the things, like there's like a 15 chapter battle scene, like where's the battle for that? Like, how can you say that's slow? But anyway, that was really like that. The climactic stuff, like the whole second half of the book, basically was very hard. And I had to do like, I remember my editor was like, okay, we're ready to go. I'm like, no, we're not. I need another few weeks on this. Like I needed to, because there was just, again, you're intercutting geographies, timelines, things happen here that have to have repercussions here. Like it was just, oh my God, honestly. That was rough. So I think that, like, honestly, that was a big part of why I was like, I can't do another multiple point of view story like that. Like, it just was, at least mostly in Bonesmith, like the Julian chapters, like he's with Ren, so I don't have to like set up, like, it's just like his point of view in a scene. I don't have to set up everything. Leo is elsewhere, so you kind of have to set some things up. But when you're constantly setting up new people and new places, like it just becomes very, it's a lot. So that was definitely the hardest book for sure. By like probably a lot if I really think about it. That one was really hard, and it came out. I needed extra time on that one. It came out in July instead of February like the other 2 did, because I was like,
I needed extra time to read it because I just could not let the series end. I just kept like, I think I like read like 2 chapters a day and just read it a really long time because I did not want it to end. I was just like sobbing every day.
I do that too. Like I put off reading the end of series that I love. I'm like, I love this, but I don't want to read this. I watched your vlog on that. You're freaking so cute. Oh my God, I die watching you. And you cry and stuff. I'm like,
I was sobbing, absolutely sobbing.
I mean, to be fair, I cried writing the third book, which I've never done before, like parts of the third book. That was new for me. I'm like, oh, I'm feeling this.
I should have done a vlog for Bonesmith. I'm gonna have to reread it again.
Perform all your reactions again. Oh no, I never saw that coming.
It was interesting because I read it like a while ago and then I read it again. And even though I had already like previously read it, I was still shocked by the things that happened. I was like, I think something along these lines happens.
Yeah.
And then this would happen. I was like, how did I not remember that?
I love rereading. Like I'm a huge rereader.
Same.
For me, the test of something I love is the desire to reread it, and hopefully it holds up and you find new things, right? Like for me, that's kind of the test of something I've really loved. So I'm, it's cool when people tell me they reread and they still enjoy it. I'm like, that's amazing. Because like I said, I'm a huge rereader, so I totally understand that. And I love to reread. So
I think I've reread Crown of Feathers probably 4 or 5 times, and it's just like chock full of like
there's a ton of
tabs.
Yeah.
I just like react to different things every time. This one doesn't look like it's as tabbed because I only tabbed like the really, really big parts, but
Right.
I actually wrote in this book, which is like blasphemous to me in most cases.
Wow.
But it was just too good. I had to write in it. So.
That's amazing. I've never tabbed. I've never done any of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always like so fascinated by that process because it's just, yeah, that's something I really do. But one of my favorite things to do, honestly, with the rereads is to do print and then audio. Like if you've, like I love to grab books I loved as a kid, find the audiobook, and like it just feels like a whole new experience. Speaking, we talked about Tamara Pierce. They have some like full cast stuff by her. So that means not just multiple narrators, but a narrator narrating the same character throughout. And then the author reads the narration. Like he said, she said, like really, really good. Like I think they did that for the Wild Magic series, like the one that's probably closest to Crown of Feathers. And it's just, so cool. So that's like a fun way to make a book feel like new, like to really experience it differently.
And I have read the audiobook for the series, so.
Nice.
Hope we're having a delightful day. Yes.
Sure are.
Okay. So we were talking about fan favorites earlier. Who do you think is going to be the fan favorite of Bonesmith and why?
I think it's already evident. Well, it's like Leo, probably. Yep. Like everyone loves Leo, but weirdly Ren. Like people really like Ren, and I do.
I love them all.
I thought she would be more. I thought she'd be more like Val, where people would love her or hate her.
Mm-hmm.
So most people, I mean, at least the ones that are contacting me, seem to really like her, which I'm like thrilled about because I adore her and I love that kind of character who's like. When I was writing her, I was thinking of, I don't know if anyone here has read the Vampire Academy series by Rochelle Mead. She was like Rose Hathaway, who's the narrator of those books. And she's just like someone who is like arrogant and cocky, but clearly it's like covering up some, self-consciousness and who makes mistakes, but they're so passionate about what they do. I think you kind of forgive them for it. Like they're not being an idiot. Like they care a lot. Like it's a fine line. I adored. I remember reading, Vampire Academy was out when like Twilight and all that. So that's a long time ago. But, it was a vampire book. So people were scooping up vampire books. I remember reading it and like she was such a contrast to like Bella. Not to hate on Bella, but Bella's very sort of like passive and like, oh, I don't know. And like not like, oh, I'm ugly, but all the boys love me. And like just being sort of, she was a frustrating character to me. And Rose is like, I'm hot, I know it, like, but she has other problems. I just found her to be like a great narrator. So Ren is kind of in that mold. And I just love those kinds of characters. Like she's not like, I think there's a line where characters can be like sassy and spunky, but they're kind of stupid and like they don't listen. And like Ren has a bit of that, but I think she grows. And anyway, I love Ren, and she was so fun to write after writing like Veronica, who's a bit more of like a level-headed and like maybe naive, and like she was just such a fun change. So
I love Veronica though because she is tough but also vulnerable. Like there's so much depth to her. Like she can turn it on and like be tough and like like that more like stereotypical main character female, but she also has that like empathetic side to her, and she cares. Like there's so much more to her, and I feel like that's what I don't like about a lot of female characters, at least when I was reading books like when I was younger. Is like female characters are either like very girly or very tough, and there's no in between.
Yes, totally.
So I love a well-rounded, like you can be tough, but you can also like to wear dresses and be compassionate.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Like I think when we were talking about like Tamara Pierce, like writing good, like I think Veronica is good. She's very good. And I think she's like the who I would aspire to be. Like something about her is like you said, empathetic and like just caring, but also like finding her own strength. And she does start sort of naive because she's got a journey to go on and things to learn. And, so I think getting her called naive, I think is unfair. Like, I mean, I get it, but it's like, give her a chance, right? But
she hasn't had like a lot of life experience at like the first beginning of the book.
Oh, and I mean, in general, we're very hard on who are supposed to be like 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds. Like, do you remember yourself in high school? Like, you were kind of a mess, girl. Like, like you were doing stupid crap all over the place. So let's slow down the judgment here. But I think like, and given the way she was raised under her sister's thumb, like I think it makes perfect sense. But I understand like for people it was, anyway, that's the complaint I get for Veronica is that she's too naive. But Like, yeah, like, you know, so I thought Ren would also get a lot of grief, but most people seem to really like her, to my
Good.
surprise. So I'm like, yeah, but Leo is like beloved. Like,
Oh
everyone,
my gosh.
yeah.
I think most of my tabs are like Leo's point of views. Like there's one part, I can't remember the exact phrasing. I have it tabbed, but he's like, if anyone, oh, here it is. Flipped right to it.
Nice.
He didn't know if he could properly flirt with a sack on his head, but if anyone could do it, it was him. I was like, yes. I love that line. I don't know why. Cracks me up. Leo
The visual is fun to think about.
Yes.
I mean, he's someone too, honestly, who kind of just walked on the page. Like the first scene I ever wrote was him and Ren, and they were just bantering. I'm like, ooh, like they just kind of. I remember talking about, like, I feel like Veronica was most Veronica when she was with Val.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's when I got to know them is when they were talking to each other. And I think as soon as Leo and Ren talked, like I really knew who they both were because of the way they reacted to each other. Like they're quite similar in some ways, but he just was fully himself from the first page, and he was just so easy to write. So,
love him.
You know, I'm like, I think I'm probably gonna have to do a chapter or two from just to get more of him in the story.
Oh, absolutely.
He's a joy to write. Like he's so funny. He's a lot of fun, and yeah, his one-liners and whatever. Like he just, you know, he's sort of stereotypical, but I think, you know, you try and show that there's more to him than just, you know, like being whatever. He thinks he's hot and like he's rich and whatever, but you know, there's more to him, I hope. But yeah.
But there was like another line that they were talking about, we have 3 in the fight, and he goes, I don't know if I'd count me or something. Yeah. I think
there's something endearing about characters who sort of know who they are and aren't ashamed of it. I think that's Ren's appeal. Like she kind of knows she's like putting on a show, and like she knows that about herself, and I think that's what makes her. If she was completely oblivious, you might be like wanting to shake her, but she like, you know, she's putting on the brash attitude. She like, and I think we know that, so it makes us like see her more clearly. And Leo is like, I have many skills, but fighting is not one of them. And, you know, like, so something about that's very endearing, I think.
Oh gosh. Okay. I think I know the answer to this question because I've read your answer to this before, but just in case anyone in the chat here doesn't know, is like explain like your process of setting up the elemental magic system of Bonesmith and like how that came to be.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to think back to, so I did, like, I set out inspired by elemental magic systems, and I think like Avatar: The Last Airbender is like a great example, and also one I was really thinking about. And like my first iterations of this world had only, I think, like 6 smithing abilities, and they had like, I kind of divided the map like they do in Avatar, like where each place had its, you know, and I wanted to, like, I'm trying to think. When I decided, like, I was tinkering with, I think, materials that come from the earth. So I was like, metals are obvious, and I was like, stone, and then I thought of, I think wood was the other one. So I'm like, you know, the roots come from, that one's like, you know, it's harder to classify them. Like I was kind of, my kid was like natural elements, and then there's like these metal elements. And it wasn't until I thought of bone as a material that this book basically came into being. Like, you know, when I started with the idea of 2 enemies allying to rescue a prince, like that was all I really had. And then I was thinking about, okay, like, why are there enemy? And and I had the idea of like the wall, and there being this like, you had to traverse this like dangerous wasteland. And I was like, okay, well, you know, why is it dangerous? Like, what is happening here? So it took me a while. You know, this is like, you know, I'm working on it on the back burner while I'm working on like Crown of Feathers and stuff. So in bits and pieces. And then I finally think of like bone as a natural material, and that just blew the whole story wide open, because I'm like, well, bone, like that comes from a body, and that, you know, if you're talking, I don't know what, like, I'm like, what if the bones are haunted? Like, what if there's ghosts? And then suddenly it becomes this story about ghosts, and it never really, like, I didn't set out to write that, but by kind of following my line of thought through the magic system, that's where I landed. So, you know, I was thinking of like metal and stuff like that's all been done before too, I think. I mean, nothing, you know, bone magic has been done before too, but I think like that's where I hit on something a little more unique when I thought of bone as a material, because otherwise I was just like, you know, metal magic, cool, like, you know, stone stuff is very similar to what they do in Avatar. And, you know, I was kind of trying to find my way through to something a little, I mean, I kind of did the same thing when you think about Crown of Feathers. Like I was initially inspired by like dragon stuff. I wanted something slightly different, and then I land on phoenixes. I'm like, oh my god, phoenixes are so cool.
They're so cool.
They have such like they have a, I would argue, an even richer mythology and like more interesting, you know, magical properties than a dragon, even though dragons are far more popular. So this is kind of a similar process. Like I'm kind of tinkering with things that are pretty familiar, and then like, oh, like bone, like how cool is that? So then I, you know, followed that to the end, and really the bone stuff really defines this story, of course, like my main character. But the metal magic and stuff is fun too. I'd love to do more metal. Like I feel like I barely kind of scratched the surface on that stuff, but and I mean, it was actually very hard to do the metal magics. I think initially I was making them too powerful. Like I wanted to make Julian the Ironsmith, like, you know, can he liquefy metal? Like, can he sort of change it midair? Like I was kind of going crazy with it, but I'm like, then they'd probably have like bullets and not like swords. And like, I sort of started, I'm like, would they have trains? We're gonna have industrial revolution. Like I was kind of like, I was like, oh my God, this is getting out of control. So I kind of landed on something more like telekinesis, like they can sense the thing, they can lift it and move it without their hands. And then obviously the bone stuff has some extra properties with the undead and everything. So I kind of reined myself in a little, but I do love metal magic stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if I revisit that again, but yeah, it's funny. Like I said, I didn't set out to write anything about ghosts or like anything like this, and it just sort of happened. It's just kind of crazy.
If you were a smith, what kind of smith would you be?
So this is a funny question. Like we always create worlds that we probably actually die in, you know, like I don't actually want to be anywhere in this world. So I think my answer would be like, I'd like to be a goldsmith so I could be rich and comfortable and just stay out of the limelight. Like I would not want to be a bonesmith. God help me. Like no way. So it's kind of like maybe kind of a cop-out answer, but yeah.
No, I love it.
Yeah, I would not be out there digging in the mud, fighting ghosts and digging up bones and stuff. Like, no, thank you.
Okay. How did you go about developing the characters' interactions and their impact on Ren's growth?
Oh.
That's from Brie.
That's what, sorry?
It's from Brie.
Brie, great question. That is something I don't think I did terribly consciously. Like Odile, who is sort of a mentor character to Ren, was a very late addition to the story, and she actually did a lot of legwork for me. That, you know, it's kind of funny, like these things happen sometimes late in the process, and she's very important for Ren. But you know, I didn't plan that early on, and like Julian, I was aware of the fact that kind of like, again, Jon Snow and Ygritte from Game of Thrones, like they're both living on opposite sides of this wall, and they've both been told different stories about each other. So I was aware that Ren and Julian were going to have that kind of interaction. Like they were going to have different concepts of what was true, what was false, and like different perspectives on each other. So that, I think, it is inherent in the concept, I think, of like enemies to allies to whatever. But I didn't, you know, character is something that I think I do intuitively. So I'm not always aware of what I'm doing. And then I do a lot of work and revisions to make it like better. So I think by interacting with Julian, she was going to have more information, understand her world better. And I knew that, like, you know, her father is a huge kind of thing for her to deal with. And I knew that she was going to kind of, am I allowed to like spoil a little? Like, you know, if you don't want to be spoiled, please vacate. It's not major, but, you know, she kind of rejects him at the end, whereas she's been striving for his love all along. And I knew I wanted to get there. Like I wanted to get to the point where she could, you know, her dagger, Ghostbane. When I came up with that idea, I was really excited because it's very symbolic. Like it's kind of like symbolic of her approval and her fitting in her house. It's taken from her early on, and then he gives it back to her at the end. But suddenly it doesn't mean it, you know, it doesn't mean as much to her. She doesn't really want it anymore. And she kind of, you know, leaves it behind. And like, that was very symbolic of her growth. So those things were deliberate, but you know, the stuff with Leo, like they understand each other so well. I didn't really plan that. It just kind of happened. And like I said, Odile was a big part of her, like, you know, the mentor role. And I just, that kind of happened late. So I guess it's a mixed bag. Like you try and have some idea of where they're going to go and what's going to happen. But a lot of the stuff on the way, I think, just kind of happens organically.
The real treasure is the friends you made along the way.
Yes, exactly. And the little surprises. And, you know, you can't, as much as I might try, you can't plan every little thing.
Yeah.
Usually the good stuff comes kind of by accident or by the weird magic of story where suddenly your brain probably in the background was like working on something you weren't aware of, and then it all comes together like accidentally. But I'll take credit for it, that's for sure.
What is your favorite bit of knowledge that you learned from writing Bonesmith? Like, did you do research on anything, and like, what's your favorite?
Yeah. Like a lot of gross like body decomposition stuff, which is like no one wants to really know that, like, you know, how and I feel like this happens with every book, like how wound, like would someone die from XYZ, right? Like you're trying to write something that makes sense. But I remember looking up like how bodies decompose. One of the things I had to figure out early on, well, not early on, like early in the revision process, I came up with the concept of the anchor bone, where the ghost is attached to a specific bone the most strongly. And my editor was like, why? Which bone? And I was like, I don't know. So I came up with the idea of like the bone closest to the death wound. And I remember kind of having to look up like how do people die of like old age or like certain things, like to understand how to explain away these things. So it's kind of just weird information, but you know, most people in old age, it's like eventually organ failure, like something eventually quits, right? So I was just trying to like explain my world. That's not particularly interesting, but I had to look up that stuff. I did look up whether or not antlers are considered bone, because I was kind of, and like teeth, and I was like, you know, where do I want to draw the line here? So antlers, you know, it's actually not super clear, but I kind of just don't treat them as bone. And I, you know, and early on, Ren and her Reaper reap an animal, and it has antlers, but they take the skull, like the skull, the anchor bone. So I kind of just glossed over that. But yeah, weird things. You're like, oh, is this like, you know, there's always so much Googling that happens weirdly.
I bet your personal FBI agent's thrilled with your Google search.
Like, oh, she's moved on from like dying in fire to, you know, being buried alive or whatever. I looked up for this. Like, cool.
What is your favorite type of scene to write? Do you like writing romance? Do you like writing battle, action, dialogue, just like banter between characters?
Yes.
Right.
I generally like, I don't have any, I'm trying to think of any scenes I really hate. One thing, like, I mean, I like all those things. I think battles, like I mentioned, the Crown, like Wings of Shadow, like battles can get really complicated depending on the scale, but writing actual like choreography of action is usually, if I take the time to think about it, I usually, you know, can enjoy that. But I wouldn't say it's a favorite. So probably more like romantic / banter type scenes. I like writing sort of like set dressing. Like I like to describe things. I like to imagine a really cool place. Like that stuff's really, I think, helps like immerses me, you know, like those are the scenes. I kind of write those for myself as much as for the reader. But yeah, I mean, I think the ones that are hardest for me are kind of dialogue scenes when you need to get something across. Like you need something to be explained here, and you're trying to do it organically, and you're trying to make the conversation flow properly, because people don't go, so tell me about XYZ. Like you're trying to make it organic and trying to make it feel natural. Like those are some of the hardest scenes to do. And they're usually like in revision, we're like, okay, I need to explain this somewhere, you know, and you're trying to insert these things. Like those are very hard. Because you know, you don't want to explain so much in narration, although I do it lots, but you're trying to find organic ways to explain things. Like that's definitely hard. And yeah, like sometimes just trying to get the conversation to go a certain way is like just so
I think that worked really well between Ren and Julian, like each telling the stories they heard from like their sides of the wall. I think that
totally, if you're smart as a writer, I'm sure you can contrive situations where it's very organic to talk about these things, which it would be when they're comparing stories. But sometimes you're not. Sometimes you can put yourself in a bad position. Like the only person that knows something is this, you know, like sometimes you're trying to find, again, that's why I think Odile was really helpful, because she could actually give a lot of explanation in a way that kind of made sense. But yeah, like at times it's really hard to explain so much, like just the mechanics of the story, making it come together. Like those are hard scenes and not very fun.
Are there any elements of foreshadowing like that you hope readers notice upon rereading?
I mean, all of it, I hope. I try and foreshadow, and it's a fine line too, where you don't want to give yourself away, right? Like you're trying to be all like sneaky about it with the hopes that once the reveal is made, everyone goes, like I should have seen it, right? Like that's the kind of the goal.
Apparently I get shocked twice.
that's again, but you hope people notice it, but it needs to make sense even if they didn't, right? So it is like a weird, and you do a lot of that in revision. So, because again, sometimes ideas come to you late and you're like, oh my God, this is perfect. Now I just have to go back and make sure this makes sense all the way through. So that is an important part, I think, of writing interesting reveals and interesting, like, complicated stories, is making sure that those things are seeded early. And it's also the hardest thing, I think, about publishing, because you publish your first book before you get to work on the sequel. So sometimes you're working on the sequel, you're like, oh my God, like I wish I could have planted this earlier, or I wish I didn't say this because now I can't do this. Like, it's hard to, you have to like sort of work with what you've got, and that can be hard too. Because like it's like, Crown of Feathers too. And you forget, man, you forget some of the things you did, you forget some of your own rules because you've revised so many times and you've been through it so many times. So it can be hard, it can be challenging, and you can, I'm sure, contradict yourself. So it is like a tricky thing to do, and some authors do it so friggin' well. Like, oh my God, it's so satisfying when you get like a really good twist, and you're like, oh my God, it was there the whole time.
Yeah,
it was there the whole time. Like, that's the beauty, right? That's like such a satisfying thing.
I love it. All right, we'll do a couple last questions. If you have any questions that you want to ask Nicki, put them in the chat while we're asking these few here. What is your next project?
Well, right now I'm working on Bonesmith's sequel. So that is kind of, I'm like knee deep in that. Let's do it at the end of this month. I've also been working on, I have a middle grade book coming out that I'm so excited about. It's like a magic school story. It's called The Last Hope School for Magical Delinquents. And the kind of pitch is like all the kids that get expelled from like regular magic school wind up at this school. So the kids with like weird, uncontrollable magic, the kids who are kind of bad eggs, I guess, they all wind up here. So it's been so much fun to write this. I'm so excited about it. That's supposed to, like, the Bonesmith sequel and this book are both supposed to come out next year. They're both kind of in the final stages. Yeah, it's been a busy couple of years. I tried to make things easier on myself after Crown of Feathers, and then I sold 2 series at once. But yeah, so I'm working on both of those. They're both kind of nearing the finish line. The Bonesmith sequel is supposed to come out in I think August next year, like next summer for sure. And I think the middle grade should be in the fall, but I don't know the exact stuff yet. But yeah, and then I'm cooking up new ideas. Always publishing is weird, right? You're always kind of working a couple years ahead of time. Like, Bonesmith sold in 2021. Is that right? Anyway, like, so you're always kind of working ahead and stuff. So yeah, I'm kind of tinkering with other ideas as well, but mostly just finishing up those 2. So I'm really excited to finish the Bonesmith sequel. It's a sequel and it's the last book, so there's a lot to get through, but I'm excited to get that done. And then I get to launch a new series. So
how does it feel to like go from young adult to middle grade? Is it a weird adjustment?
It's not. Honestly, it's been like a friggin' joy. I think there's something, there's not really, like, I don't write down in any way, like, so I'm not thinking like this is for kids, but by its nature, there's like, it's shorter, even for me, although it's still kind of long. And like, there's not, there's not this huge romantic subplot, for example. Like, there's not as many subplots. Like, I think it's more streamlined. So in some ways that's and like, it's, for once in my life, there's only a single point of view. So like, it just feels like more like, pew, like faster and like more fun. I don't know. And the tone, I think, is different too. It's like a contemporary fantasy. So there's less world building up front and just in general. So in some ways it's like just been like an easier experience. But I love the idea so much. It's also, and it's lighter compared to like, corpses and bones and stuff. So like, it's been fun to switch between them. And then when I'm working on the middle grade for a while, I'm like, oh, I want to write something really like angsty and dark. I can't wait to get back to my YA, So it's been really fun to switch between the 2. Like, it's kind of satisfied different parts of me as a writer. So that's been a lot of fun. But it doesn't feel like, like I said, I don't try and like write it down or make it like silly or make it, I don't know, like, I'm writing stuff that I want to read, stuff I think is funny. Like, it's just the characters are a bit younger, and like just the focus is maybe a little narrower just because the kind of story it is. So yeah, it's been really fun. I'm so excited about that one.
The next question is kind of like fitting that topic, but it's like double. So do you have any dream kind of like plots you would love to write if you could? And do you ever, according to Alex, plan to write an adult novel?
The second question, yes, 100%. I'd love to write an adult novel. It's definitely in the kind of plans. I have some ideas that would definitely suit that. So who knows? That could be one of the next things I try and do. It just depends, I think, on which ideas take off in my brain. Like I'm someone who always has a lot of ideas. Like I probably have like 10 that I could probably focus on any one of them and make a book out of them. But then, you kind of follow your interests, you follow what you're feeling at the time, and suddenly something gets to the point where like, oh, I think I could write this. So that's usually what you focus on. Like I had one of my ideas that I think would be an adult project. I started writing it when I was querying the book before Crown of Feathers. So that's like, it's been in my head for a long time.
Yeah.
But just finding the moment. And to be fair, it's an epic fantasy, and I think I might need a little break from epic fantasy. Like it's just, it's really exhausting. So, but who knows? Like now that once I finish the Bonesmith series, I'll be working on the middle grade. That might be enough of a break for me to feel like ready. But it's hard. It's a lot of work. Like epic fantasy is so much more work than like even contemporary fantasy, like so much more work. So I think I need like a little break on that. But I definitely 100% would love to write an adult story. It's definitely kind of on my list of things to achieve. What was the first question? Dream
plot, like dream type of like tropes, I guess, or
I don't know. That's hard.
I keep saying pirates. You need to write pirates.
Pirate. I could totally write a pirate. What's funny is like, again, like I didn't set out to write a ghost book. Yeah. Like sometimes it just gets thrust upon you. So like I am open to writing all sorts of stuff, and there's lots of things I'd love to write. And the pirate idea might just fall in my lap based on something else, right? Like I would totally do that. Here's a funny thing. I've been asked quite a few times if I'd ever write a dragon book. And I was like, I mean, I guess, but I don't have an idea. Well, I kind of have an idea now. So I'm like, maybe I'm going to be writing a dragon book, but I didn't really set out to do it. But suddenly, like you follow the right plot bunnies, you kind of follow the inspiration. It's kind of related to, I made that trip to go see some dinosaur bones. Yeah. So my dragon idea is kind of tied into all that.
Yes.
So, I'm like, suddenly I'm like, oh, I guess maybe I'll be writing that, so sometimes you have control, but sometimes you just kind of go where the ideas take you. So it's hard to say if there's one that I'm like dying to write. I think in general, like I've mentioned a few times, I adore the Game of Thrones series, and I would love to write like some massive sprawling story like that. But I can also see how hard it would be. And, Crown of Feathers was kind of my version of that. But I love those big sprawling worlds. And I think even like someone like Cassandra Clare, who has her like Shadowhunter universe with all these series tied together, like that's something that would be very cool to do. Though, again, I feel like I might, like it's a lot. And I feel like it might like be hard to actually execute, and I might maybe get bored. Like I'm surprised she's done that for so long. Like that's really impressive. I feel like I would get bored. But again,
pull George R. Martin and just take 14 years between books.
Right? If only I could be so successful. Although that would kill me to take so long to do something. I would just get it done badly to get it done. Like, oh my God, I could never. But yeah, it'd be cool to do like some kind of tie-in universe, like with related series and stuff. But that's not really up to me. That's up to the success of your books, right? Like you hope that you get to a level where they might want that kind of thing. Even, everything I do, like the Bonesmith, I originally pitched it as a trilogy. And I think there's a lot here, but I landed on doing a duology because they only want to buy 2 books. And I just want to, it's hard to write a series when you don't know how many books you're going to have. So I was like, okay, if you bought 2, I'm going to do 2. But there's so much there. And like, if it was super successful, it'd be so cool to do spin-off stuff. And like, it would be really fun to do those kinds of things. So like, I don't know if that really answers the question. Plot stuff, I'm open, like cool tropes and stuff. Like I'll probably do all of them eventually. Like I'm love all that. But I think like story universe stuff would be really cool to do.
I feel like you're hitting all of my favorites, like magical creatures, elemental magic, magical academy coming up. Like, I'm loving it. So
right. And that's true. Like a magic school book is something I wanted to write for a long time. Yeah. My first ever novel I wrote was it was like X-Men meets Harry Potter. Ooh. And I was obsessed, like I was like so into that. So that really doing a magic school story is like really hitting a huge like bucket list item for me. And I can't think if I have another one really off the top of my head, like in terms of a story idea. Again, I'd love to write an adult book. I hope I do. Like there's goals like that, but I can't think of another like story element that I'm really like fixated on. But I really wanted to do the magic schools thing. So
do you think you'll stay in fantasy, or do you ever plan to write like sci-fi or romance or historical or anything of that nature?
Good on you for not saying contemporary, because I can never write just like a straight up contemporary. I don't know what I would do with myself. I'm hoping to sci-fi maybe eventually, but I think I'm like, it would be very soft sci-fi. Like I'm not a science person. Like I don't think I would get really into like the hard science elements. So like space opera or something would be more my speed. And who knows, maybe for sure. Right? Like that's the stuff I like to watch.
Pirates in space.
Boom, idea. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Like that could totally be something.
Yeah.
With no immediate plans, but that's totally could be something. Historical, I think I'm closer to. I had a historical fantasy heist idea book years ago now, but it never really came together. But historical fantasy is probably what I would do. Like even if it was just like alt history, like our history, but a bit of magic or a bit of something. Like I don't think I'd ever do a straight up historical. I'd be very surprised if I did that. Although I love to read it, and I love to read historical romance. I love, I read romance too. I'd love to write a story that's more. I thought Bonesmith was more romance forward, but a lot of people are like, "Oh, the romance is a really small subplot." I'm like, "Is it?" I was like trying really hard to make it a romantic book, so I'd like to write something romance forward. But I think
romantic.
Right, like, but I can't sacrifice the world building.
Yeah,
that means too much to me. So I feel like I never quite hit that. For me, people will always tell me, I think, that there's a lot more world and plot than there is romance. Like I think it'd be hard for me to hang a story on the framework of romance alone. I've tried, like I've been trying actually recently. I'm like, can I write a story that's, like the way you approach is entirely different. All your plot beats are romance related, not like your character's goals. I'm like, I don't understand this. So
yeah.
It would be, I'd love to write something more romance, because I love to write romance, but I love to write all the other crap too. Yeah. But it'd be nice to do something more romance forward, just because it's super fun. But I don't know if I could ever quite do a full romance. I think that would be really hard for me. But who knows?
Maybe we'll see.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I like I said, I like to read it, and yeah,
romantic space. Adult now.
Perfect. You guys just write me a pitch real quick and I'll see what my agent says.
Okay, we'll do this last question here because I also would like to know this. Any plans for book signings in the US?
No, sadly. Nothing now. Who knows what next year will bring? Nothing for my YA stuff. Who knows if my middle grade stuff gets more attention? Maybe. I would love
to fight some people.
Right. I would love to come down and do any festivals and all these things, but you gotta get invited. And I haven't been. So nothing right now. Who knows? Like I'm open to it, and I would go even, like if I had some author friends, like I would go, let's go do something. Like I would totally do that, but it does require, planning and stuff on your end, and it's just not. I'm too busy right now, to be frank, to like spend the time to put that stuff together. Even the UK trip, like I sent myself there, so that was a lot of planning and stuff on my end to go and do that. So it is a lot of work and money and everything. So I would love to, but not anytime soon. Like I said, maybe next year, but it would be maybe for the release of the middle grade. But I wouldn't, who knows with that. But yeah, too bad. I had like some stuff planned in the US before.
I know, we were planning and then dang 2020.
That was a problem. I got lucky that at least I released my book before everything went.
Yeah.
Some people obviously lots of horrible things happened, but a lot of poor debut authors and people, release their books right in the middle of all that. I got kind of lucky in that regard, but I did miss out on some travel and stuff. So, but who knows? I love New York too. Like I always, maybe I'll make a personal trip into a work trip at some point. But follow me on Instagram. That's where you would hear about it. You can also follow my newsletter. Like I'm kind of the newsletter. I'm not being great about that, but generally, I would share it, right? If anything like that was coming up, one of those places for sure. So,
I could probably get my bookstore to invite you if I talk to the right person. All right,
Alex, talk to them. Talk to me. Let's do it.
I'm an event planner in my day job, so it sounds like I just need to plan an event.
Oh, look at you people. Okay, you two talk. I mean, Alex, both of you. I mean, I could probably drive.
Yeah,
you guys aren't very far from me. Northern Buffalo, New York. I could drive Pittsburgh. There's some places that aren't that far for me that wouldn't have to be necessarily like a big undertaking potentially. But
I mean, even like Niagara Falls is like a day trip for me.
yeah, right. So I mean, Niagara Falls is a couple hours away from me. So I mean, I thought about doing stuff for Bonesmith, like looking at places just across the border. But again, it takes a lot. And I think when you're doing it all yourself, it just kind of be like, is this worth the headache? And events are kind of tricky. Sometimes people just don't really show up, so it's kind of a roll of the dice and kind of, so yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was fun.
Everyone sign up for the Ride or Die newsletter if you haven't already.
Yes.
And read Bonesmith if you haven't already.
Yeah.
And Crown of Feathers.
Yeah, for real. Now those three are all out, which is nice, right? Some people don't like to start a series before they're all out, so those are all out.
It's ready to binge.
It's ready to binge. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining tonight, Nicki.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you guys later.
Yay!
Bye.
Bye.